Okay, so something's been building this week that I really need to talk about, because when I was looking at the chart for today, I kept coming back to the same thing over and over, like, this combination doesn't happen very often, and I genuinely don't think people are fully registering what it means. Yesterday, February 10th, Venus moved into Pisces. And before I even get to what that means, I want to explain why that specific placement is not just another transit. Pisces is the one sign in the entire zodiac where Venus is in her exaltation. That word gets thrown around a lot in astrology, but what it actually means is that Venus operates at her absolute maximum strength here. If you think of every planet as having a home sign where it functions well and a detriment where it struggles, exaltation is a whole separate category. It's the placement where a planet doesn't just function well, it exceeds itself. Venus in Pisces loves without condition, feels into people rather than thinking about them, is drawn toward what's transcendent and sacred, and has this quality of openness that doesn't require certainty before it gives. Love, beauty, compassion, the ability to feel deeply and receive deeply, all of that is turned up as high as it goes when Venus is here. She was in Aquarius before this, which is interesting energy but fairly cerebral, a bit idealistic, love from a principle rather than from the heart. Moving into Pisces is like stepping out of the bright fluorescent space and into somewhere warm and candlelit. Everything softens. Everything feels more present somehow. And then today, February 11th, Mercury makes an exact conjunction with the North Node at 9 degrees Pisces. And this is the part that kept pulling me back, because when you put those two things together, Venus freshly arrived in her exaltation and Mercury locking onto the North Node in the same sign on the very next day, you get this very specific quality of moment. A moment where the things you feel and the things you think about start pointing in the same direction. Your emotional world and your mental world, your intuition and your communication, both orienting toward destiny at the same time, which doesn't happen that often, and when it does, it tends to matter. Before I go further, leave a like and subscribe if you've been feeling something shift this week, because you're not imagining it. And drop "I'm listening" in the comments. I want to see who's tuning into this particular frequency right now. Okay, so let me actually break down what's going on here. Mercury conjunct the North Node is one of those aspects that astrologers flag as significant because it marks a moment when your mind gets a clearer line to your actual direction. The North Node is not a planet. It's a moving point in the sky tied to the Moon's orbit, and it represents the direction of collective growth. The themes we're all being called toward in this phase. When Mercury touches it exactly, as it does today, ideas that have been circling for weeks start to feel like actual plans. Conversations that felt meandering start to feel like they're about something. Dreams, and in Pisces I do mean literal dreams while you're asleep, not just metaphors for your ambitions, start carrying information in them that your waking mind can actually use. What makes this particular conjunction different from others is the sign it's happening in. Mercury conjunct the North Node occurs several times a year as Mercury moves faster than the nodes, but each time it's in a completely different sign, and that changes everything about how it comes through. Pisces is the sign of the subconscious, of everything that lives just beneath the surface of your ordinary thinking. Mercury in Pisces doesn't process information the way it does in Gemini or Virgo, the signs Mercury rules. It doesn't move in straight lines. It thinks in images, in feelings, in that kind of arriving before you know why, knowing. So when Mercury hits the North Node here, the message you receive isn't necessarily going to land as a clean, logical thought. It might come as a feeling of recognition, a moment where you just know something and can't explain how. A dream that stays with you past noon. A song that catches you in a strange way. A name or a conversation fragment that keeps surfacing. Something your body registers before your brain does. That's Pisces. That's how it speaks. And here's the context that makes today even more significant. Also on February 11th, Mercury enters what astrologers call the retrograde shadow. The official retrograde doesn't begin until February 26th, but today Mercury reaches 8 degrees Pisces, which is the exact degree it will eventually return to after stationing retrograde and then going direct again in March. What that means practically is that the pre-retrograde review period has already started. Whatever conversations, ideas, or realizations arrive around this Mercury North Node conjunction today, those themes are coming back around. This isn't a one-time message you receive and move on from. It's the opening of a longer conversation between you and whatever direction you're genuinely being called toward. The retrograde that follows is going to give you time to go deeper into exactly what's surfacing right now, to reconsider things from a different angle, to arrive at a more honest and complete version of understanding. The seed is being planted today. The full bloom comes later. So the single most useful thing you can do right now, practically speaking, is pay attention and write things down. I know that's boring advice, but with Mercury in Pisces specifically, this matters more than usual, because Pisces is simultaneously the most intuitive and the most forgetful placement for Mercury. Your instincts will be sharp, your recall will be hazy. If something arrives in your awareness that feels meaningful, get it out of your head and onto paper. Immediately, your 11 p.m. insight will not survive until morning if you just trust yourself to remember it. Keep something to write on next to your bed. Keep a notes app open on your phone. Whatever works. The channel is open right now, and that's worth taking advantage of. Now back to Venus, because I don't want to rush past what the exaltation actually means in terms of how things feel. Venus rules love and relationships, yes, but more broadly it rules how we value things, what we're drawn toward, how we receive beauty and pleasure and connection, what we're willing to invest our energy and heart into. When Venus is in Aquarius, where she was before this, she tends to love in a way that's principled and forward-thinking, a bit detached, more interested in the idea of love than the actual experience of it. When she moves into Pisces, all of that shifts. Venus in Pisces feels her way through the world, rather than thinking her way through it. She doesn't need everything to make logical sense before she opens. She gives without keeping score. She receives without making you prove you're worth it first. And she's sensitive in a way that can be almost overwhelming. She picks up on the emotional atmosphere of a room. She feels other people's states as if they're partially her own. She's moved by things that others barely register. For those of us watching this transit, what it means is that the love quality available right now is real love. Not the convenient kind, not the kind that comes with terms and conditions. The kind that actually touches the parts of you that most relationships don't reach. And because Venus is in the sign of the North Node, that quality of love is also pointing toward growth. Meaning the connections opening or deepening right now aren't just emotionally satisfying, they're pointing you in a direction. They're part of what you're becoming, not just what you're enjoying. And I want to be clear about something, because I think it's easy to hear Venus in Pisces and assume I'm only talking about romance. The Piscean quality of love extends to creativity, to spiritual practice, to healing, to any area of life where you're being asked to be genuinely open rather than defended. Venus exalted in Pisces is also asking, what would happen if you stopped protecting yourself from beauty, from wonder, from the very real possibility that something genuinely good could happen? Pisces at its core is the sign of faith, not religious faith necessarily, but the basic willingness to not require certainty before you allow yourself to feel something. Venus here is asking whether you can extend that faith to your actual life. There's also something worth saying about timing here. Venus will be in Pisces until March 6th, so this is not a one-day energy, it's a multi-week window. But the opening of any Venus transit tends to be the most charged period, when the tone is being set and the first impressions are made. Whatever begins in a Venus transit tends to carry the quality of that first day forward. So what you open your heart to today, what you allow yourself to feel or acknowledge or reach toward, that sets a kind of emotional tone for the entire Venus in Pisces cycle. This is not pressure to do something dramatic today. It's just a note that the quality of your emotional presence right now is particularly formative. How you're orienting your heart this week matters. And Mercury conjunct The North Node is delivering the message about what that looks like specifically for you, where your mind is being pointed, what your intuition is already telling you that you might be explaining away, what direction your life is asking you to acknowledge and move toward. All right, let's talk about the signs. I want to note that if your sun isn't in one of the signs I'm going to highlight, that doesn't mean you're not feeling this. It means you should look at where 9 degrees Pisces falls in your personal chart, because that's the house being activated. That's where this Mercury North Node message is arriving for you specifically. The signs I'm going to focus on are the ones where this transit is making direct, strong contact with a major life area. Pisces, this is yours most of all, and I think you've been sensing something building for a few days already. Mercury moving through your first house, your identity, the way you present yourself to the world, the energy you lead with, and conjuncting the North Node right there, is essentially the cosmos pointing a spotlight directly at your self-expression. The direction you're meant to grow in is tied to how you communicate, how you show up, and how authentically you let people see what's actually going on inside you. Not a polished version, the real one, and I know that's complicated for Pisces. There's this tendency to feel everything very fully, more fully than most people around you, and then translate it down into something more digestible before it leaves your mouth. You're sensitive to how things land. You're aware of what might be too much. And so there's often this gap between the richness of what you're actually experiencing internally and what you actually let out. The North Node in your first house through Mercury today is saying that gap is where your growth lives. Not by suddenly having no filter and overwhelming people with everything you feel. That's not the point, but by trusting that the specific quality of your thinking, the symbolic, the intuitive, the deeply feeling, non-linear way your mind actually works, is not something to manage down. It's something to offer. The retrograde shadow starting today means this is going to be more of an internal process before it becomes an external one. You're going to have a few weeks of turning things over, reconsidering, refining. That's actually useful for you. Don't rush toward a final version of anything right now. Let the ideas and realizations come in at their own pace. Write them down, sit with them. By the time Mercury goes direct in late March, you'll have a much clearer and more honest sense of what you're actually trying to say and how you want to move through the world. One concrete suggestion: pay very close attention to your dreams starting now. This is not vague spiritual advice. I genuinely mean keep a notebook or phone right next to your bed for the next several weeks. Pisces, with Mercury in their first house conjuncting the North Node, will often receive information most clearly through dream imagery and hypnagogic states, those half-awake moments right before sleep or right after waking up. Your higher sense of direction is communicating through that channel more actively than usual right now. Don't dismiss what comes up just because it doesn't arrive as a rational plan. Virgo, you're sitting on the opposite end of this axis, and that means Mercury North Node is activating your 7th house, which is the house of partnerships, contracts, significant one-on-one relationships of all kinds, not just romantic. This can show up as a conversation with a partner that suddenly feels like it's about something real. A realization about what you actually need from the people you're closest to. A clarity about whether certain relationships are growing you or holding you where you were. Mercury in your 7th conjuncting the North Node is saying there's a message arriving through your relationships right now that's relevant to your actual path. And Venus freshly in Pisces is in your 7th house too, in her Exaltation, which is a genuinely beautiful placement for partnership energy. What Venus in Pisces in the 7th asks of Virgo specifically is something your sign tends to find challenging, which is presence without analysis. Virgo brings incredible thoughtfulness and attentiveness to relationships. That analytical quality is actually a form of love, but sometimes it becomes a way of evaluating from a safe distance rather than actually being inside the experience. You're watching and assessing and tracking everything so carefully that you're sometimes slightly outside the room, if that makes sense. Venus in Exaltation in your 7th is inviting a softer and more surrendered kind of engagement. Less figuring out what's happening, more just being in it. I also want to note something for Virgo that goes a little deeper. The 6th and 7th houses in your chart are directly across from the Pisces-Virgo axis, meaning Pisces themes have been showing up in your relationships and partnerships for the entire time the North Node has been there. Whatever has felt a bit foggy or idealistic or confusing in your closest relationships over the past year and a half, that's the North Node in your 7th, asking you to develop a different kind of relational muscle, one based less on clarity and correctness and more on trust and genuine feeling. Mercury conjunct the North Node there today is like a direct download about what that actually requires from you. It might arrive as a sudden understanding of what went wrong in a previous dynamic. It might arrive as clarity about what you actually want from a relationship, as opposed to what you've been accepting. Either way, the information is worth receiving. If there's something you've been wanting to say to someone, a truth you've been carefully editing, or a feeling you've been waiting to confirm before you expressed it, the Mercury North Node conjunction in your 7th suggests this is a window worth using. Not because you need to have everything resolved, but because the honest version of the conversation carries weight right now, that a carefully managed version doesn't. And with the retrograde shadow starting, if this doesn't happen today, the theme comes back. You'll get another shot. But if something feels ready, let it be ready. Cancer, you're in a particularly flowing position with this transit because Jupiter is currently retrograde in your sign at around 15 degrees, and the North Node in Pisces forms a natural trine to Cancer, meaning this whole configuration is reaching you through a channel that's already open and receptive. You're probably noticing that your instincts about people and situations are unusually clear this week. Things that seemed complicated or uncertain are settling into a kind of quiet knowing. Your emotional intelligence is operating at a high level, and it's worth trusting that. With Venus entering Pisces and beginning to move toward her trine to Jupiter in your sign, and that trine becomes exact on February 22nd, but you're feeling the approach of it already. There's this warmth flowing into your emotional world that's genuinely significant. Jupiter retrograde in Cancer has been doing a slow internal excavation of your sense of worth, specifically your sense of what you deserve to receive, as opposed to just what you're good at giving. If you've been in a pattern of overgiving, of making yourself available and nourishing while quietly going without yourself, Jupiter retrograde has been holding up a mirror to that. And now Venus, in exaltation trining it, is like the universe flooding that mirror with warm light and saying, the time for that particular self-denial is over. What Cancer needs to watch out for right now is the reflex to redirect incoming warmth rather than receive it. If someone expresses appreciation or affection or care toward you this week, don't immediately deflect it or redirect it back onto them. Don't minimize it. Don't find the thing that's still missing and focus on that instead. Let it actually land. Sit in it for a moment. That capacity to receive gracefully without immediately managing or passing it along is something this Jupiter retrograde is working on developing in you, and Venus in Pisces is giving you a very concrete and immediate opportunity to practice it. One more thing for Cancer specifically, and this connects to the Mercury North Node conjunction. Pisces is in your 9th house, which is the house of belief, philosophy, meaning, spiritual understanding, and the larger story you're telling about your life. Mercury hitting the North Node there today suggests a message is arriving about meaning itself, about the larger framework through which you understand your experiences. If you've been operating from a belief about yourself or your life that actually came from pain rather than truth, that's the kind of thing this transit tends to surface. Not to hurt you with it, but to hand it to you so you can decide consciously whether you still want to carry it forward. The retrograde that follows is going to give you time to examine that kind of foundational belief more carefully. Let what comes up this week be the beginning of that examination rather than something to quickly resolve and move past. Gemini, you feel Mercury's movements more directly than most signs because Mercury rules you. And the fact that Mercury is entering its retrograde shadow today is something you might be sensing as a subtle shift in quality, even if you haven't consciously named it. There's a slight turning inward beginning to happen, a softening of the usual outward momentum. Pisces is an interesting and somewhat unusual territory for Mercury, because it's actually Mercury's sign of detriment, meaning the typical Gemini mode of quick wit, rapid processing, and sharp verbal communication has to slow down and adjust. Pisces communicates through feeling and image and impression, and Mercury here is being invited to trust that mode rather than override it with speed and cleverness. The North Node in Pisces falls in your 10th house, which is your house of career, public life, reputation, and what you're building in the world over time. Mercury conjuncting the North Node there today is pointing toward a message about the direction your work or your public path is genuinely meant to take. And I want to be honest that this message might arrive somewhat obliquely, in a feeling of pull toward something rather than a clear plan, in a dream about work, in a conversation that suddenly clarifies something you couldn't see before. Pisces doesn't hand you a business plan. It hands you a sense of rightness, a direction that feels true even if you can't yet articulate why. The retrograde cycle beginning in your 10th house this month means you're about to revisit professional decisions, reconsider things you thought were settled, and potentially revise your understanding of what success actually means to you. That can feel destabilizing if you're someone who likes to know what you're doing next. Let the process do its work. By late March, you'll have a much more honest and refined sense of what you're actually building toward, and that clarity will be worth the uncertainty in between. For everyone else, a quick rundown of where this is landing. Scorpio, this is in your 5th house of creativity and self-expression, and there's a message arriving about what you're genuinely meant to create or enjoy. There's something in the creative or romantic part of your life that's being pointed toward its next phase, and the message might arrive through a dream or a piece of music or something that moves you unexpectedly. Sagittarius, it's in your 4th house of home and emotional foundation, and something about your roots or your sense of belonging is being asked to evolve. Capricorn, it's in your 3rd house of communication and immediate environment, and the conversations happening closest to you right now are carrying more information than they appear to. Aquarius, this is in your 2nd house of values and resources, and there's clarity coming about what you actually care about versus what you've been going through the motions for. Aries, it's in your 12th house of the hidden and the subconscious, and what's surfacing through dreams or quiet moments is meant to be noted even if it doesn't fully make sense yet. Taurus, it's in your 11th house of community and future vision, and the people in your network are pointing you towards something if you pay attention to who keeps coming to mind. Libra, it's in your 6th house of daily work, health and habits, and some adjustment to your everyday routine is being called for in a way that actually matters for your long-term direction. Leo, it's in your 8th house of transformation and shared resources, and something is completing or deepening at a fundamental level right now. Wherever Pisces falls in your chart is where this message is arriving. Pay attention to that area of your life over the next several days and into the retrograde period, because the themes coming up now are going to be developed and deepened through March. Now, there's one more thing I haven't mentioned yet that I think is actually the most important piece of context for why today specifically feels the way it does. Saturn is currently at 26 degrees Pisces, and in 2 days, February 13th, Saturn moves into Aries. This is a massive transit on its own, Saturn entering Aries for the first time in roughly 30 years, and it's made even more significant by the fact that Neptune entered Aries on January 26, just 2 weeks ago. So you have Saturn and Neptune both now in early Aries, and they're moving toward their historic conjunction at 0 degrees Aries that perfects on February 20th. A Saturn-Neptune conjunction at the very first degree of the zodiac, which astrologers call the Aries point, only happens every 300 years or so. That's its own story, and I'll go deep on it when we get closer. But for today, what matters is that Saturn is at the very end of Pisces, doing final business in a sign it's occupied since March 2023. 3 years of Saturn in Pisces. 3 years of structure meeting dissolution, reality meeting imagination, responsibility meeting spiritual surrender. That's a long time for one theme to be present, and it's wrapping up in the next 48 hours. What that means for today's configuration, Mercury conjunct the North Node with Venus, exalted in Pisces, is that there's this quality of completion and recognition woven into everything. Like before the chapter fully closes, there's a moment of seeing clearly what it contained. The Mercury North Node conjunction is the mind getting a clear signal about direction. Venus exalted is the heart being fully receptive. And Saturn in the final degrees of Pisces is the structure acknowledging what the last 3 years actually taught. If something is wrapping up for you emotionally or spiritually or in a relationship this week, let it close with awareness. Not necessarily with grief, but with the recognition that something was learned that is now being carried forward into the next chapter. The people who grew the most during Saturn in Pisces are the ones who figured out how to hold both structure and surrender at the same time. How to keep showing up for what was real without grasping for certainty they couldn't have. How to trust something even when the proof hadn't arrived yet. That's what Pisces teaches, and Saturn in Pisces made it unavoidable. And today, with Mercury touching the North Node in Pisces and Venus arriving in her exaltation here, that lesson is being acknowledged and integrated at the same time the chapter is drawing to a close. So whatever is becoming clear for you right now about a relationship, about your direction, about who you are and what you genuinely want, that clarity is not accidental. It's not a lucky guess, and it's not you being overly emotional or reading too much into things. It's the product of everything the last few years have been working on in you, quietly and persistently, even in the moments when nothing seemed to be moving. Saturn in Pisces asked you to keep showing up for things that weren't yet certain. It asked you to build in the fog, to commit without guarantees, to trust your own sense of what was real even when the world around you was blurry and shifting. That's hard. And the ones who did it, the ones who stayed honest with themselves through all of that, are now standing somewhere different than where they started, somewhere clearer. That's what's becoming visible right now. Not something new arriving, but something earned finally surfacing into the light. Trust it. Write it down. Don't talk yourself out of it before you've even given it room to breathe. Let Mercury carry it forward into whatever the retrograde is going to ask you to look at, again from a different angle. And know that by the time Mercury goes direct in late March, you'll be standing in a much more honest and settled relationship with your own sense of direction. Not perfect clarity, that's not what Pisces offers, but real clarity, the kind that comes from actually having been through something rather than just thinking about it. That's what's happening today. Venus in Pisces in her exaltation, Mercury exact on the North Node at 9 degrees Pisces, the retrograde shadow beginning, Saturn wrapping up 3 years in the sign. These things happening together on the same day is not a coincidence, and it's not a small thing. It's a moment where the emotional, the mental, and the structural are all pointing in the same direction at the same time, which is genuinely rare. Most days one of those is moving while the others are doing something else entirely. Today they're in conversation with each other. Today they're aligned. It's a doorway, and it's open right now, and the only thing required to walk through it is paying attention to what you already know. If this resonated, leave a like and subscribe. And drop "I'm listening" in the comments below. I read through them and your responses genuinely shape what I go deeper on next time. Take care of yourself this week. I'll see you in the next one.